They said empires are built with steel and blood. But Sultan Bayezid of the Ottoman Empire knew another kind of weapon, one made of silk, obedience and silence. On the 27th night of June 1390, a single woman became the living proof of his victory. Her name was Olivera Lazarević, Princess of Serbia, daughter of a fallen king, and the price of Bayezid's revenge. The palace of Edirne shimmered in the heat of summer. Jasmine perfumed the night air so thickly it felt narcotic. Inside, walls glowed red and gold under oil lamps. At the window sat Olivera, dressed in silks worth more than her father's treasury, jewels glinting like captured stars. Yet no amount of luxury could drown the emptiness. She hadn't spoken her own language in months. The last servant who dared whisper Serbian had vanished before noon. Every sound, every scent, every word in this new world reminded her that she was no longer a daughter of Serbia, but an acquisition, a trophy of war. Then came the footsteps she feared most, heavy measured, the kind that silenced every breath in the room. Sultan Bayezid had arrived, and tonight he would remind her that even royal blood could be owned. A year earlier, Olivera had been a princess, promised in marriage to a Bosnian noble, surrounded by guards, servants, and the illusion of safety. Then came the Battle of Kosovo. Her father, Prince Lazar, fell on the field that broke Serbia's resistance forever. What survived of her kingdom was carved up and reshaped into tribute. Her brother Stefan became a vassal to the empire that had killed their father. And Olivera became the price of peace. They called it a diplomatic gesture. In truth, it was a public surrender wrapped in silk. The Sultan did not need her dowry or her bloodline. He needed what her presence symbolized, that Serbia's defiance had been tamed, its nobility humbled, its daughters delivered to Ottoman hands. When she was brought to Edirne, the air smelled of foreign incense, and the palace guards did not meet her eyes. The harem gates closed behind her with a soft finality that sounded almost merciful. From that moment on, she was no longer a princess, no longer Serbian. She was property, repurposed into ornament. Her letters to her brother were censored and dictated. Her words no longer belonged to her. They belonged to the empire that had conquered her voice. The harem was not chaos. It was order sharpened into a cage. The corridors smelled of rose oil and discipline. Women moved like shadows, trained, graceful, silent. Olivera was assigned a chamber of her own, walls draped in crimson silk, marble floors polished so bright she could see her reflection and barely recognize it. Her instructor was an older woman named Humaira, small, calm, mercilessly precise. She had entered the harem decades earlier and spoken no language but Turkish since. Her first lesson was simple: Serbian ends here. When Olivera tried to respond in her mother tongue, Humaira raised one hand and said, "Each word in Serbian keeps you chained to a dead kingdom. Each word in Turkish keeps you alive." Language was the first battle. Identity, the next. She was taught to walk, to sit, to lower her gaze at the right moment, to measure her breath when speaking to those above her. She learned court etiquette, poetry, the flute, and Ottoman verse. Knowledge, they said, would refine her, but every lesson cut another thread to her past. At night she whispered Serbian prayers into her pillow, half afraid the walls would hear. Her father's name, her mother's songs, her homeland, all were forbidden relics. The luxury around her shimmered like temptation. Silk sheets, jeweled combs, perfumed baths, rewards for compliance. The more she obeyed, the more she was adorned. But every new bracelet felt heavier than the last. Weeks became months. The princess who had once ruled servants now bowed to them. And when she looked into her bronze mirror, she saw what the Sultan wanted her to become: a woman remade, perfectly obedient, perfectly silent, the final trophy of a conquered land. The message came at sunset. A eunuch entered Olivera's chamber, bowing low, his voice calm and practiced. "The Sultan requests your presence after evening prayer." Her heart didn't race, and it simply stopped, like the world had gone silent for a single beat. This was what the weeks of grooming, silence, and obedience had been preparing her for. She bathed in rose water, her hands trembling under the surface. Servants brushed her hair until it glowed like dark silk. Humaira watched every movement, correcting the smallest imperfection. A gesture too human, a glance too defiant. "You must be perfect," she said. "Not beautiful, perfect." When the eunuch returned, she followed him through endless corridors lit by golden lamps. The palace seemed quieter than usual, as though holding its breath. The carved doors to the Sultan's chambers loomed ahead, walnut inlaid with ivory, beautiful and merciless. Inside, Bayezid sat near a low table. He looked up from a book and gestured to the cushions opposite him. "Sit," he said. His tone was measured, almost gentle. They ate in silence first. Figs, lamb, and sweet wine. He asked about her education, her language, her music. His curiosity was real, but it wasn't kindness. It was power examining its new possession. When he rose, the world seemed to tilt. The questions ended. The ritual began. No brutality followed, only inevitability. A soft voice giving commands, silk sheets, and the quiet domination of a man who didn't need force to make obedience absolute. Olivera's mind drifted far away, to forests in Serbia, to the sound of bells on St. Vitus's Day, to anything that wasn't this. When it was over, Bayezid told her, "You have served well." Then he turned away. She walked back through the same corridors, but the woman who entered those doors did not return. The mirror waiting in her room reflected someone else, painted, polished, perfectly controlled. That night the Princess of Serbia ceased to exist. In her place stood Despina Hatun, jewel of the Sultan's victory. 3 months later, Edirne's marble halls echoed with ceremonial footsteps. Bayezid had summoned ambassadors from Serbia for new treaty negotiations, demanding higher tribute. They expected a political audience, not the cruel theater that awaited them. When the throne room doors opened, the Sultan sat on his dais beneath banners of the crescent moon, flanked by his generals. And there, beside him, shimmering in gold and silk, stood Princess Olivera. The envoys froze. They knew her. One had carried her father's seal. Another had dined at their castle before the war. Now they saw their princess draped in Ottoman jewels, smiling as though she were honored to stand beside the man who had destroyed her bloodline. The silence in that room felt heavier than stone. Bayezid broke it with practiced ease. "Your princess," he said, gesturing casually toward her, "finds comfort in my court. You see how well peace serves those who accept it. It wasn't a statement. It was humiliation made flesh." Olivera's smile held like glass. She had been told to appear radiant, content, obedient. Behind her painted calm, she felt something inside her fracture. The ambassadors bowed, their voices trembling as they offered rehearsed words of allegiance. They couldn't meet her eyes, because her eyes told the truth. That night, when she returned to her chamber, she tore the jewelry from her wrists and whispered, "They made me a weapon." And she was right. She wasn't just a captive. She was a message. A living banner proclaiming that resistance was useless, and submission meant survival. From that day forward, every time she stood beside Bayezid, she became the empire's silent proclamation, "Even your princess bows to us." The days after that audience felt endless. Olivera moved through the palace like a ghost wrapped in silk. Servants bowed to her, musicians played for her, poets praised her beauty, but she heard nothing. The echo of her own forced smile haunted her every night. Then one morning, a eunuch delivered a letter sealed with a familiar crest. Her brother Stefan had written again. The same careful formality, the same words shaped to survive Ottoman censorship. He asked about her health, her comfort, her faith. He couldn't say, "I miss you," but the ache lived between every line. Bayezid's officials watched as she read, their eyes sharp, searching for rebellion in her face. She showed none. Only when they left did she let her breath tremble. That night she wrote her reply under supervision, each word weighed, reviewed, approved. She thanked the Sultan for his mercy, praised the palace gardens, and assured her brother she was honored. But hidden beneath her flowery praise were fragments of defiance. A mention of the light through the mosaic windows meant the church back home still stood. A description of a nightingale's song meant she remembered their mother's hymns. Stefan learned to read her secret language. It became their lifeline, each coded word proof that her spirit, though trapped, had not been extinguished. Years passed like this, letter after letter, smile after smile. Outwardly, she was Despina Hatun, jewel of the Ottoman court. In secret, she was still Olivera, the Serbian princess, whispering through paper across enemy lines. Even under gold and silence, her rebellion lived ink by ink, small, invisible, but undefeated. Years blurred into each other inside the harem. Seasons passed unseen behind the lattice windows. Olivera's youth hardened into quiet endurance. She had become a relic of the Sultan's early conquests, respected but no longer desired. Her new purpose was to train the young women brought in after each campaign. She taught them how to bow, how to smile, how to survive. Some called her the truth-teller. She didn't comfort the new captives with lies. She told them plainly, obedience keeps you alive, but memory keeps you human. Then came Hafsa, a Circassian beauty, barely 18, with eyes that could unmake reason. The Sultan's gaze found her instantly, and within weeks she was his new favorite. Her rise was meteoric and dangerous. Hafsa learned fast, too fast. She gathered followers, whispered schemes, and soon began to see Olivera not as an elder, but as a threat. One afternoon she approached her in the courtyard, smiling like a cat. "Tell me," she said sweetly, "does honesty still protect you, old one?" Olivera's answer was steady. "It keeps me real when everything else here is performance." 3 days later, she was summoned. The Valid Sultan questioned her loyalty. Hafsa had accused her of clinging to her Serbian past, of spreading doubt among the women. For a moment, she thought her end had come. But the Sultan's mother, wise with age and politics, simply said, "Let the child have her illusions. You teach what others cannot." Olivera was spared, but she understood the warning. Even in silence she had enemies. Even in age, the harem demanded performance. When Hafsa fell from favor a year later, Olivera didn't gloat. She simply watched. She had seen this cycle before. Beauty crowned, beauty replaced, obedience forgotten. The system devoured everyone eventually, and in that understanding, she found a grim kind of power. The power of survival, when survival itself was rebellion. By the turn of the century, the empire trembled beneath its own weight. Bayezid, the man they called Yildirim, the Thunderbolt, had conquered lands from the Danube to Anatolia. But even thunder can be silenced. In 1402, the news came like a whisper through the marble halls. The Sultan had fallen. Timur the Mongol had crushed the Ottoman army at Ankara. Bayezid had been taken alive. The invincible had become the captive. Panic seized the harem. Servants ran through corridors, clutching treasures. Concubines prayed or wept. Guards vanished from their posts. Yet Olivera sat still, listening. The empire that had devoured her father was now devouring itself. For the first time in 12 years, she felt no fear. "So this is what it sounds like," she murmured. When chains crack, Bayezid died in captivity months later. His empire shattered into chaos. Sons fought sons for the throne. In the ruins, the harem remained untouched, maintained by bureaucrats who didn't know how to stop its machinery. Even without a sultan, it continued to function, like a great beast that no longer remembered why it was alive. When Bayezid's son Mehmed claimed the throne, Olivera was absorbed into his household. By then she was 34, too old for summons, too valuable to discard. Her beauty had faded, but her mind endured. She trained others, managed routines, and wrote letters Stefan would never see. Years drifted into decades. She lived in quiet detachment, a relic among women who thought captivity was normal. Her secret rebellion had become invisible, just the act of remembering. Remembering her father, remembering Serbia, remembering herself. When death finally came in 1421, she was 53 years old. The Ottomans buried her in Edirne under the name Despina Hatun, an honored woman of the imperial court. But far away, her brother built a monument bearing her true name, Olivera Lazarević, Princess of Serbia. Two graves, two identities, one woman divided by empire. Her story isn't just about conquest. It's about endurance. Silk and marble disguised her prison, but they never silenced her will. For 32 years, she was a captive who refused to vanish, and when empires fell and kings turned to dust, her quiet defiance remained, a whisper that outlived the Thunderbolt himself.